I'm a bit lost, and so I need your help, if that's okay with you. I'd like to ask you a simple question and have you just raising your hand if you agree with this or not. The question is, raise your hand if you already felt a bit lost in training, or either preparing a training because you didn't really know the subject, or because you were following a training that you didn't really understand the context or the reason why you're here, just like Olivia said, what the hell am I doing here? So, okay, so you're gonna most probably relate with my first mission, or one of the first missions I've had in the pharmaceutical industry. What I got was training new entrants, medical sales reps, and what I got as a briefing was, pay attention. Olmesartan exerts its antihypertensive effect through selective AT1 receptor antagonism, thereby attenuating angiotensin II mediated vasoconstriction, aldosterone secretion, and renal sodium reabsorption.
What?
Right? That was my question as well. And so I realized that, well, if I started like this, I would have lost all the learners, right? And that's when I realized that we don't need it to be boring. We can work it out, we can make it better. And so what we did instead was that we created a little simulation of a city. This city had tiny streets, and those tiny streets could be upgraded, and it was up to the users to choose what streets should be upgraded into avenues. And so, as the heart and the veins, the cars in the city can flow a little bit better and easier. And therefore, that's what we did. Once the trainers, they had this experience, I then read exactly the same thing, and I said, this is exactly what's happening in the human body. What you're seeing on the game is what you're seeing in the human body. And then they understood the mechanism of the medicine, and then it was much easier for them to explain that and to negotiate with doctors different prescriptions and so on. The reason why it was a game, it's because they were new entrants, 20-something-year-olds, and the first thing I asked was, what do you like? And most of them said, gaming. So, what we realize as well is that the problem with most training is that learners, they are first presented with lots of content that they don't really get. They have to be explained, they watch it, and then they start taking action. If we try to revert things, we can do exactly the opposite, and then we can have them actually being active and learning. So they're making decisions, they are discussing, they are moving forward together. We managed to test and feedback. We managed to work with all of them together into building something bigger. And that's not me saying. There are several studies saying that. In 2019, Harvard made 225 studies that prove that active learning essentially reduces by 55% the impact of failure. By working with active learning, the learners, they don't realize that they are learning, but when they have to put in practice, it's much easier for them to do so. And therefore, that's how we started working with gaming. But now, what we also realized is that gamification is not the goal. But gamification, it's useful for challenging the users to get them on board, to get feedback with immediate consequences. We get progression, so they see what they're actually doing throughout the games. And we managed to improve social energy, just like you mentioned before. So all of that we have through something very simple, something that we've done since we're tiny kids. So when they're playing, the users are actually deciding, investigating, prioritizing, collaborating, negotiating, reflecting. They're doing so many things. And once we do that, we have results. Those results we can also test. And if we test them, we can test on the field. So what we've done is that when we launched this medicine, we compared with the different product launch. And then, as Anna just said, we compared the KPIs. And the KPIs of the first product launch that didn't use any gamings had one specific type of result. And then, with the gaming, we realized that the sales reps, they were much more engaged, they were much more impactful, and they were especially much more convincing with the doctors, which is the basis of a sales rep. Up. Here we have 3 examples of a successful business case. We have the agency that works in reflection, deduction, and through that we use it as an icebreaker, and this icebreaker can measure how people are working and what they actually need in terms of communication, working groups, and so on. And with that, we can create a report, and people, HR, knows what they need to do with that group of people. And so we can develop a specific training that is long-term and has actual impacts that we can also measure later by playing another game. Ink and Truth, the Castaway, they're all games that help people work and get out of the silos, for instance, work with quick decision making and so on. But what is important to know is that those games, they don't replace training. They are there just to open the door and to have people realizing they actually need the training. Now, this is all very pretty, but what happens when we have to do it worldwide? What happens when we have to launch specific seminars and events in Europe, but at the same time in China, and then in the US, or in Brazil, where I come from? Quite complicated, right? Well, we have digital learning. Amazing! We put some videos on, people watch it, and that's it, right? Check. Well, again, no. We can create simulations and we can have the same games that we had physically, we can do it online. And so we can have people actually trying to solve a crime, learning from others, questioning people, adapting to the person in front of them, even if this person is just virtual. And that's it. But I just realized that I don't have a thank you slide, so thank you.